Sacramento just 2 days before the primary there. Joining me now here in Washington to discuss the escalating war of words between Clinton and Trump is one of Trump's big supporters, potential running mate and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, welcome back to Fox News
Sunday. Good to be back.
Clinton, as we just pointed out in the last segment, went after Trump's temperament this week, saying that he's unfit to be president. And one of the things that Trump did this week was repeatedly accuse the judge who's handling 2 Trump University fraud lawsuit cases of bias. Here he is.
We're building a wall. He's a Mexican. We're building a wall between here and Mexico. The answer is he is giving us very unfair rulings that people can't even believe.
Are you comfortable with a potential president attacking a federal judge for his heritage?
No. This is one of the worst mistakes Trump has made. And I think it's inexcusable. He has every right to criticize a judge, and he has every right to say certain decisions aren't right, and his attorneys can file to move the venue from the judge. But first of all, this judge was born in Indiana. He is an American, period. When you come to America, you get to become an American. And Trump, who has grandparents who came to the U.S., should understand this as much as anybody. Second, to characterize, if a liberal were to attack Justice Clarence Thomas on the grounds that he's black, we would all go crazy. Every conservative would say it was wrong, and it was racism. And Trump has got to, I think, move to a new level. This is no longer the primaries. He's no longer an interesting contender. He is now the potential leader of the United States, and he's got to move his game up to the level of being a potential leader.
Do you consider what he did here racism?
I think that it was a mistake. I think that I hope it was sloppiness. He says on other occasions that he has many Mexican friends, etc., but that's irrelevant. This judge is not Mexican. This judge is an American citizen and deserves to be treated. Now, that means he can attack him as a judge and say he's a liberal and he's against me and he's doing things I don't agree with. And he has lawyers who are supposed to be doing that. If it's a good case, they should file to change the venue.
Trump also attacked the media this week for trying to check up to find out whether, in fact, he had given the donations he promised to veterans groups. Here he is.
What I don't want is when I raise millions of dollars, have people say, like this sleazy guy right over here from ABC. He's a sleaze in my book. You're a sleaze because you know the facts and you know the facts well.
Now, you have been known to go after reporters, including me, but Trump has gone much further. He is literally kicking reporters whose coverage he doesn't like out of public rallies.
Yes.
Can you understand why some conservatives worry whether or not Trump understands the role of a free press and the First Amendment?
The thing that struck me, particularly after this event, FDR in the 1930s invented the fireside radio chat to get past all the conservative newspapers. Trump now has a big enough social media presence that he can take on most of the news media, and it's a fair fight. And I think part of what he's probably decided is that he wants to be very aggressive to make sure that his supporters routinely discount any kind of news media attack.
Yeah, but that I can understand. Kicking reporters out of rallies?
I think that's silly, and I think that doesn't get him very far. I mean, if they ask my advice, I'd say get used to the idea you're going to have reporters, and then you live with it. That's part of being a public figure.
This brings us to Clinton's foreign policy speech this week, where more than his ideas, she went after his temperament, his fitness to be president. Here she is.
This is not someone who should ever have the nuclear codes, because it's not hard to imagine Donald Trump leading us into a war just because somebody got under his very thin skin. Now imagine Donald Trump sitting in the Situation Room, making life or death decisions on behalf of the United States.
When Trump, let's review the bidding here, attacks a judge for his heritage, when he kicks reporters out of open public rallies, when he attacks the Republican governor of New Mexico, which you yourself said was destructive, doesn't that raise questions about his steadiness?
Of course it does. And that's why Trump's at one of the most interesting turning points in American history. And think of it this way. He won the nomination as a golfer. It was him. He was the only guy on the field. He made all the decisions, and he beat everybody. I mean, it's one of the most amazing marches to a nomination in American history. Now he's in a team sport, more like football. I mean, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, has to know what Trump's doing. Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, has to know what Trump's doing. Republican governors have to be able to relax around him and not worry about getting attacked. This is a fundamental change for Trump, and we'll see. I mean, I've been amazed at his speed of growth, how fast he learns. I think he's now at a very key turning point. But Hillary also has a different problem, and that is results rather than words. The biggest story this week politically was 38,000 jobs being created, the lowest number in 5 years. The biggest problem for Hillary is her record. You raised it yourself earlier, not to pick on you, but you said correctly, Libya is a total disaster. The Russian reset is an absurdity. Syria is a complete mess. Iraq is still in the middle of a war. Afghanistan is in the middle of a war. Somalia has collapsed. And by the way, we just found a Somalian war criminal, an alleged war criminal, who is working as a security guard at Dulles Airport. I mean, there are enough things in the results zone that Hillary can't deal with, that while she's winning on words, the reason she can't put away the nomination is the results are so bad.
But you talk about Trump being at a turning point.
I think he is.
Let me argue that you're at a turning point, too, because you have been a Trump supporter, and there is talk about you as a potential running mate. At some point, don't you have to take stock? I mean, you've raised a lot of questions about his behavior today and say whether or not you can continue to support this man.
Well, compared to Hillary Clinton, I can support Donald Trump all year. Hillary Clinton will be an absolute disaster for the United States. She'll appoint left-wing judges who will move this country for a century into a world I don't believe in. And her foreign policy, the results of her foreign policy are a disaster.
And despite the things we're talking about, you would still...
She is a much more flawed person than Donald. I mean, first of all, somebody who will not release her speeches for which she got $250,000 apiece, accusing Trump of lack of transparency, shows you that chutzpah is at the core of the Clinton model.
Well, one could argue his not releasing his tax returns, but that he's got some chutzpah too.
He does. But I also remember, and you'll remember this, in 1980, as late as Labor Day, Ronald Reagan had 3 or 4 days in a row that were a disaster. And all of us who were for Reagan are going, oh my God, what's going to happen? They got their act together. By mid-September, they were on the way to one of the biggest victories over an incumbent in American history.
Okay, let's turn to another subject, because Trump, as we pointed out, is attacking Clinton's ethics. Both Clintons back in the 90s, the Clinton Foundation, the private email servers. Now she is going after him. Take a look.
It turns out it wasn't until the press shamed him that he actually made the donations he had promised. He is trying to scam America the way he scammed all those people at Trump U.
Just as I asked John Podesta about Clinton, won't it be hard for Donald Trump to play the ethics card against Clinton?
Well, first of all, anybody who's read Clinton Cash or anybody who has an understanding of Peter Schweizer's work knows, for Hillary...
This is about the Clinton Foundation.
That's about the Clinton Foundation. It's about all sorts of deals. It's about the misuse of the State Department. I mean, you have to love the degree to which Hillary lives in an alternative universe in which nothing she has done counts against whatever she says next. And on Trump University, Trump has a simple assignment. Find 5 people who are graduates who are willing to go on TV and say, my life was improved, my income went up, it was a good experience. If he does that, then his goal has to be that on results, he is always better than Hillary. On words, she may occasionally be better.
All right. This week, we saw clearly the most violent protests yet against Trump, with brutal attacks, and we have them up on the screen, brutal attacks against Trump supporters leaving rallies. Clinton has condemned the violence, and at least in San Jose, it seems the protests were organized by immigrants, not Democrats. Question, if these violent anti-Trump rallies continue into the convention, into the fall, how do you see it factoring into the campaign?
The country will become enraged. I mean, the fact is, you go look at Madison, Wisconsin, where there were huge demonstrations against the elected governor, Scott Walker, the elected legislature, doing exactly what they won the election on. If Donald Trump is serious about changing Washington, every federal employee union will be in the streets. Because the first thing you have to do to be serious is make it possible to fire corrupt, dishonest, and
but
illegal...
But you don't think a conceivable backlash where people say, Trump is just too divisive?
I think when people see the American flag being burned, they don't side with the people burning the American flag. I think it drives Hillary and Sanders into a very narrow box. This is 1968 all over again. This is the hard left saying, if you don't do what we want, we're going to be physically violent, and we're going to pick on some woman who can't defend herself. I don't think that is sustainable, and I think the American people will be repulsed by the idea that the hard left gets to dictate to the rest of us.
Finally, you have said some very candid and tough things, critical things about Trump today. Do you ever say that to him?
Sure.
I mean, are you that candid? You say...
Yes. The great thing about Donald Trump is that he listens, but he doesn't necessarily obey. I have to say, as a former teacher, but he's very open to direct conversation. He actually prefers people who are blunt and direct with him because he knows how big his ego is. He knows how big a personality he is, and he knows that it takes a fair amount to break through on that. But I'm very comfortable being as direct with Trump.
And sometimes after you've said it, does he then go back and do it again?
There's some habits he has I don't agree with, and then there's some tactics he has I don't agree with. But I can also say there have been occasions where it's actually had an impact. So I feel like it's a very good relationship. I think that he is a remarkable leader. I had no idea a year ago that we'd be where we are now, and I think that is almost entirely a personal achievement in alliance with the American people who are sick of the current system.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Thanks for your time. Always good to talk with you, sir. Up next, we'll bring in our Sunday group to discuss Paul Ryan's endorsement of Trump and the